Here we are at the end of round one of the manga tournament, and we have probably the most anticipated match so far. The titans of modern day shonen storytelling, Jujutsu Kaisen versus Chainsaw Man. Let's get to it. Both of these titles are things that my friends have been pressuring me to read and telling me how great they are recently. I was really curious to see how they stacked up, and at first I was a little upset that they got put in the same bracket together because it means that one of them is going to have to get eliminated right off the bat. But it does really make for an interesting comparison, and it will be fun trying to explain my preference here. So let's get into Jujutsu Kaisen. Characters, I gave it an 8. I felt like this was full of fun and interesting characters. They all have their own little quirks that make them stand out, and I really appreciated how the protagonist's impulsiveness directly leads to issues that he has to then face. His recklessness is what causes the central problem, or the central dilemma that he's going to have to deal with for the rest of the series, and it's played so directly. Like, there's been other comics where the impulsivity of a character is what leads them to issues, and they're getting over that is kind of the thrust of the story, like Naruto, for example, and to some extent One Piece. But I don't think I've ever read something that so directly tied in that character flaw with the central conflict of the story. So I thought that was a very interesting and very effective use of that character concept, of the character flaw within the shonen protagonist. For setting, I gave it an 8. I love the horror shonen setting that we've got going on here, and I feel like it did an excellent job of giving you information about how the world works, giving you information about how the different factions work, not having an over-reliance on info dumping, which is kind of the bane of early shonen series chapters. You've got to have those info dumps, big explanatory paragraphs of conversation where they're just saying, well, as you know, this is the way the world works. And I felt like Jujutsu Kaisen did a good job of giving that information in digestible chunks and never coming off as too overwrought. All right, so for the art and writing, I gave this a 9. I found the art to be upper end of what I've seen in the shonen genre. There's excellent fight scenes, great panel layout. There's some great use of blurring to really sell the impact of these hard hits. The writing is genuinely funny without relying on like crass or gross out humor. For plot, I gave it an 8. It's a strong opening. Jujutsu Kaisen's influences are very clear without being derivative, and there's a clear trajectory for the larger story that they're wanting to tell within this manga. Intrigue, I gave a 9. I'm definitely invested in the world here. It does an excellent job in creating tension and suspense and ensuring that the reader continues going through the story, but it's occasionally heavy-handed. There is a point in here where there's this very direct, like, these characters are going to go into the situation, and by the end of it, one of them will die. And it's going to bleed over into Volume 2, but I felt like that was a little bit too much. It felt like the writer wasn't sure enough in his world building and what he had done so far to ensure that readers stayed on board, and had to do something a little bit more direct and a little hokey to get people to continue reading in these early stages. Relationships, I gave an 8. They're a little undercooked at the moment, but I felt like that's more a product of the characters not knowing each other and not trusting each other, not having developed any bonds, and not from any deficit of the writer. This is clearly just the growing pains of putting a new group together. There's a lot of distrust. There's a lack of group dynamics. While they're not developed yet, I think that that's realistic for what's going on at this point in the story. The overall enjoyment, I gave a 9. It is the strongest shonen series I've read up to this point. I feel like the only things really holding it back from that 10 are that it feels a little too mired in older shonen tropes, like the character who has the blindfolds over his eyes. There's no real point to that. It just seems like it's cool for that to be a thing. Characters have very quirky attributes to them. I said that it was a benefit in the character bit, but some of them are a little bit odd, and I feel like it's just oddity for oddity's sake. So like the tough, rough and tough character who collects cute stuffed animals, and the girl who wants to be scouted by a talent agent. So everybody she runs into, she's like, "Oh, did you say that you wanted to scout me? Aren't I beautiful?" I feel like some of these are a little heavy-handed, and so that was really the only thing holding it back, was that we seem invested in these older tropes. We can't seem to let go of some of these things when we're pushing forward on so many other fronts. That's what held it back from being a 10. Overall, 59 as the raw score for Caw Pile, which would be an 8.2 out of 10. So a very strong showing from Jujutsu Kaisen. Let's see how Chainsaw Man stacks up. All right, Chainsaw Man, last contender for round 1 of this manga tournament. Let's get into it with the Caw Pile score. So, starting off with characters. Characters, I gave a 9 out of 10 on this one. I feel like the characters in Chainsaw Man are not only entertaining and captivating in a way that many of the other shonen characters have not been, but it's done so in a way that's also believable within this fantastical setting. You really get a feeling for these characters, the struggles that they're going through, their backstories, and the things that they've had to deal with. I feel like each character ties in very strongly with the world around them. Denji, because of his parents dying and him being an orphan, and then having to work and slave for meager amounts of money and do these degenerate things for the smallest bit of cash. You can really identify with his motivation. His heart's desire at the beginning of this comic is just to have some toast with jam on it, and the world is depressing, and it reflects in that character, but you can identify with the struggle. And I feel like that's it's really a strong point in this comic, that so many of these things are going to work together. Setting, I gave a 10 out of 10. I feel like the world was fully realized. I feel like, again, it integrates so well into everything else that's going on. I love the idea of these devils that are based on different concepts, and the more terrifying that concept is, the stronger the devil is. I will say, having just read it after Jujutsu Kaisen, I was like struggling with like which one is a devil and which one is a creature from Jujutsu Kaisen. Like they're very similar conceptually, but I feel like this brings a sense of realism and grounds it in a way it's really hard to describe, but it just pulls it off a little bit better than Jujutsu Kaisen. Art and writing gets a 9. Again, we've got some great action scenes. We've got a great sense of panel layouts, of how to frame action, how to make it to where a scene where a character jumps off a roof and then has to engage with this enemy, and then another character comes up, and how do you frame all that in a way that makes sense to the reader. Fujimoto is very adept at giving us those scenes, giving us the kinetic energy when there's a fight, even if it's just like a fight between two normal people, right? There's a sense of weight and a sense of action in here that is missing from some of these other shonen titles. Plot, I gave an 8. It's similar in a lot of ways to what's happening in Jujutsu Kaisen, where we're taking these characters and we're grouping them together. Some of them don't like each other, some of them don't work well together, but the way it progresses in here is just a lot cleaner. I feel like this establishes the world and establishes the characters so quickly at the start and gives you a good sense of who Denji is and what his story is, that we free up so much more space in the manga to get into more of the character development and more of like moving the plot forward. We don't have a strong sense of like what is the end goal, which is probably the only thing that is holding it back from getting a stronger ranking. I do feel like Jujutsu Kaisen does have that over Chainsaw Man, and that there's a clear direction for the overall story. Intrigue is still a 10 out of 10 for me on this one. There's so many things that are unanswered, so many things that are teased at with the various characters' motivations and their backstories. What are they actually after? This is rife with potential plot points for the future. Is Aki ever going to be able to get revenge on the Gun Devil for what happened to his family? What is Makima's real goal? Because she seems a little enigmatic, a little bit aloof. What's up with power? And does she really, like, was it really about getting her cat back? And, you know, she betrays Denji at the end of this volume. Like, what is the fallout from that going to be? So again, just anywhere you turn in here are concepts for what can happen in the future. What might we reveal about some of these characters? Relationships, I'm giving a 9 out of 10. I could take any two characters within this story that we've been introduced to and pair them up and talk about something interesting about that relationship, something that captivates me about the interplay between those two characters. Whether it's Aki and Denji and their distrust of one another, Aki and Makima and his loyalty to her because she saved him. Any two characters you can pick here, they've got something going on within the first volume of this manga, and it's so intriguing. It's excellent to see just how everything plays out together. Overall enjoyment for this one gets a 10 out of 10. This was the best shonen series that I read in this whole tournament. It did an excellent job of getting the plot set up, getting the world building set up, leaving plenty of room for characterization. Chainsaw Man gets a compile score of a 65, which is a 9.28 out of 10. One of the highest scores, if not the highest score that we've seen so far in this tournament. I think I have to go back and look. It beats out Jujutsu Kaisen by a fair amount. Chainsaw Man was a bit more grounded in its storytelling. I felt like the characters were a bit stronger and the relationships were a bit stronger, and that's why it gets the nod in this final match of the first round of the tournament. Here is where our standings are at the end of round 1 of the manga tournament. I will be on in another week to talk about a retrospective for round 1 and what do each of these titles need to do to impress me moving forward into round 2. That is it for the final match. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoy Jujutsu Kaisen, if you enjoy Chainsaw Man, which one would you prefer If you had to choose between the two of them, or if you just prefer one or the other, give me your thoughts in the comments below. I hope your reading journey is going well, and until the next one, take care.